Just give me 2 moments. Actually, don't necessarily need the light on. I just got a couple of things. It's all right, I'll turn it on. So, okay, just give me 30 seconds. Perhaps if you'd like to turn to the book of Exodus, chapter 32, while I'm just quickly tying this up here. Okay, I'd like to just give you a little bit of a pretext to my slides. Oh, maybe not slides, maybe my talk, and then I'll explain this in a second. Yeah, basically a few years ago, Tara and I just moved into our place, and just down the road from about 400 meters away, whatever that is in feet, about the same. We were sort of we were in a newly developed area, and there was a shopping centre opening just down the road, and it was owned by Coles, which would be the equivalent of Kroger or whatever big supermarket chains here are. The whole sort of area was Coles, is the shopping centre. So among that was a lot of other things that have been opened, probably, I don't know, a dozen other shops, food shops and a couple of things. Only a small area, mind you, but Coles sort of owned that thing. And when they were, we witnessed the whole sort of development of that area, including a McDonald's there, and saw it all basically come up. And in, I don't know what's like here, but in Perth, shopping centres these days get built pretty quick. They're just slabs of concrete and a bit of stuff on the inside. But the reason why I'm talking about this is they had been advertising for quite a while for a community event, which was about this opening. You can go down for the grand opening. They'd had those flashing signs on the road for what felt like a few months. They're advertising this, and Tara was quite excited. I can't remember all the quotes that she came out with, but there were some funny things that she said. The level of excitement was through the roof, and we wanted to go down there and experience it all and stuff. And what we witnessed there was nothing like we'd probably ever seen for a shopping centre, just an everyday supermarket. And because Coles, the supermarket, they own the building itself, everyone else is renting off them. They basically had liberty to do whatever they wanted down there. So we went down. It was a Friday night. Must have been about 5 p.m. We took a walk down there after work and whatever. And the sorts of things that they had down there were, I listed them. They had like a sausage sizzle, so sausages on a barbecue. I don't know, barbecue, that's what we call it over there. They had a dunking machine. They had show bags. They had free giveaways. Little sideshow kind of competitions. They had these guys walking around and ladies walking around on stilts for some reason, giving away different things. And they had a choir down there. This lasted probably 3 or 4 days, I think. They had a choir down there. They had, when we were there on this Friday night, that was the main sort of gig. There would have been, by the way, probably 1,000 people in this place, car parking included, not just in the shopping centre. They had these Brazilian jungle drums come down, and they were doing a big show for everyone. I took a few videos of it at the time. And then the big finale was, before that, they also, in the supermarket themselves, they reduced everything, the cost of everything. So they put free, the best one that I loved was they had bananas going out for $1 a kilo. I don't know what that is. So I guess $1 these days is about 70 US cents or so, $1 a kilo. And I bought 4 kilos, of which probably about 500 grams got eaten. So, I don't know, I just like, why not? $4. That's they're usually, in comparison, they're usually about $4 a kilo. minimum price that you pay these days in Perth anyway. So it was just like, just go down there and have a great time. And as we were leaving, we left, we didn't get to see the fireworks that they had on the school oval across the road. But as we were leaving, we could sort of hear them going off. We actually went to the meeting, and I said to Tara as we were leaving, you know, I was just blown away by what the festivities. It was like going to a show or something, just around a supermarket, and it's, you know, things opening. And I said to Tara, you know, we can go there and they can get 1,000 people there, no problems. But you give someone a pamphlet and tell them that they can live forever. Nah, sorry, that's all right. I'm all right, thanks. You know, they just don't want to know about it. At least in Australia. I guess I've heard over here, you know, if you tell someone they need to speak in tongues, that's sort of when it becomes a bit of an issue. So, or at least I think they say that, yep, no worries, yep, but never actually do anything about it. It's and this is my talk tonight. Let's talk about I guess, you know, how people can be blinded by the appeal of the world, and also, I guess, just generally speaking, to all Christians, spirit-filled Christians, how we can sometimes be blinded and by the physical appeal or whatever it is that we advertised. It was enough for us to go down and have a bit of fun. And you know, they had big Christmas tree, because it was around that time of profiteroles. Is that a thing over here? Profiteroles? Can't even say it properly. Oh, they're like, say? Croquembouche. Oh, they're like little just pastries, singular pastries filled with custard. You got to get them over here. Anyway, they had a big tree, and you could go up and just pick some off. Of course, we went to the highest points where the kids weren't, you know. Anyway, so this was my, you know, it was great, and this is sort of what I want to talk about tonight. So, I guess in terms of marketing and advertising, I did a little bit of, not research, I guess, but just hunting around and different ways that things can be advertised. I don't know if they do it over here, but often if you're out in not a worldly scene, but like in a public sort of area where it's, you know, a bit of nightlife or something in Perth, some people will come and stick flyers under everyone's windscreen in the car park, or they'll, if it's a wet night, they'll glue it, you know, just stick it on the windscreen so it sticks. You know, that you go to a website and get a virtual reality tour of things. Self-publishing a book, people can advertise through books. I'm thinking of other ways other than what we would normally know, I guess, or understand. Someone that goes around like word of mouth, that's purchased a product, can go around and sell them. Sorry, not sell them, but sell them to people. Oh, yeah, you should go here. This is a great place. I was asking someone, we're going to New York next week. I was asking someone just tonight, a friend of ours, oh, anything you can think of to go in New York, you know, that can sort of lead people on. This is another way of advertising. This is a real building. They get nighttime silhouettes, and they project art onto walls. It's pretty common, I guess, around the world these days, but that is quite appealing to most people, I would say. You know, it draws you in. It makes you sort of wonder what's it all about. Inside that building, though, I don't actually know what it is, but you know, you think you'll find it's probably just a standard sort of a office block, or maybe something less. And people enjoy this kind of a thing, but what is really the important stuff in our life? I just want to go through a couple of examples. I had a couple of things. These are some ads I found. These are sort of ways that people can be drawn in. So this is an ad for a vacuum cleaner. I thought this is appropriate for America, I suppose, South, where hunting's quite common. It's an ad for a vacuum cleaner. You can see the guy at the end there. I don't know what the brand is, doesn't really matter. At the end with the vacuum cleaner. This is an ad for a razor. This was an ad for a sanitizer. Makes you sort of cringe a little bit. This is the reason why Tara always makes me push the buttons in the lift. An ad for a security system. They get broker. These are probably American. I don't even know. The horn is on the door handle there. And this one is for it says, "Are you carrying too much weight down the bottom?" It's quite lame, really. But anyway, so in the Old Testament, there's a few stories. I just want to go through a couple. Exodus chapter 32. Okay, I'll just turn there myself. That's the slides that I had tonight. As ironically as a little bit of to draw you in. Exodus 32. This is the story about the Israelites with Moses on Mount Sinai, the tablets breaking. Now when the people, verse 1, now when the people saw that Moses delayed coming down from the mountain, people gathered together to Aaron and said to him, "Come, make us gods that shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." And Aaron said to them, "Break off the golden earrings which are in the ears of your wives, your sons and your daughters, and bring them to me." So all the people broke off the golden earrings which were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. And he received the gold from their hand, and he fashioned it with an engraving tool and made a molded calf. The story of the golden calf. There you go. By the way, worth noting that gold was a valuable resource back then. So this is a golden calf is considered quite some value, I suppose. How much, I'm not sure. Then they said, "This is your God, O Israel, that brought you out of the land of Egypt." So when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made a proclamation and said, "Tomorrow is a feast to the Lord." Then they rose early, and the next day offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings. The people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. And I guess I've had this clarified to me before that. That sort of bit where it says, people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. That's actually talking about the play in those days. It's talking about more of a immoral kind of a sense, I suppose. So in other words, they became quite what we would know as worldly, I suppose. And the Lord said to Moses, "Go get down, for your people whom you brought out of the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. They have turned aside quickly out of the way which I've commanded them. They've made themselves a molded calf and worshipped it and sacrificed to it and said, 'This is your God, O Israel, and that brought you out of the land of Egypt.'" That's what I want to read just there. I guess that there's another talk in this in itself, but I guess the bit that I want to just highlight here out of this small section of this story, because it goes on a bit, God wasn't happy for one. It just highlights how quickly, in this case, the Israelites were distracted from what their original task was. I can't remember off the top of my head. I actually not even aware if it says it in there, but I can't remember how long the period of time is. But we know that the period of time wasn't necessarily more than I don't know, a couple of weeks or something. I think it was somewhere around probably a week or so. And it doesn't really matter exactly what the time was, but the point still stands that it only took them that long to be easily distracted and to, when you're not being fed something, when they're not being fed something, how things can take a turn pretty quick. And it was because, there's someone's planted the seed, and then all of a sudden that's turned into give me all your gold, and that's turned into the calf, and then that's turned into basically a big party. And how easy it can be for these guys, how easy it can be for us. I've got a couple more examples. Genesis chapter 27. So basically, I just wanted to go through a couple of examples of this, and then maybe what we can do, or what how we can help ourselves, and then finally what God is selling us. Genesis chapter 27. This is the story of when Isaac blessed Jacob after he asked Esau to go out and bring him the meat so that he can bless him, and then the stealing of the birthright, etc., which I'm sure you've probably heard before. But we'll read it anyway. I'll just probably skip a bit in the middle for time. First one to start with, though. Now it came to pass when Isaac was old, and his eyes were so dim that he could not see. So That's really important to note here, that he couldn't see. Then he called Esau, his oldest son, and said to him, my son. And Esau answered him, here I am. And he said, behold, now I am old. I do not know the day of my death. Now therefore, please take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me. And make me savory food such as I love, and bring it to me that I may eat, and my soul may bless you before I die. All right, so basically between here and I'm going to skip down to verse 18, Rebecca has actually asked Jacob to go out and get the couple of goats so that he can get the blessing. And they've devised this plan to wear a couple of coats. And then Jacob sort of said, well, what about my hands? You know, Esau's hands are quite hairy, mine aren't. What can we do? So they've actually taken the skins of the kids of the goats and put them on his hands and around his neck to make Isaac believe that it's actually Esau. That's a very layman's way of saying what happened there. In verse 18, so he went to his father and said, my father, and he said, here I am, who are you, my son? This is Jacob. Jacob said to his father, I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done just as you told me. Please arise, sit and eat of my game, that your soul may bless me. But Isaac said to his son, how is it that you have found it so quickly, my son? And he said, because the Lord your God brought it to me. Yeah, a bit dodgy. Isaac said to Jacob, please come near that I may feel you, my son, whether you are really my son Esau or not. So he knows this is how I'm going to be able to detect because he can't see him. So Jacob went near to Isaac, his father, and he felt him and said, the voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. And he did not recognize him because his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands. So he blessed him. And it goes on a little bit there. That's where I want to stop there. But again, there's another talk in this, I guess, itself. Perhaps for Jacob, you know, doing the dodgy and taking the Lord's name in vain so he can get the blessing. That's a different story altogether. What I wanted to highlight here was the point of view from Isaac, as if we were ever in that point of view, or let's just say a Christian in general. I guess the fact that Isaac couldn't actually see, that I guess that can occasionally be us from time to time, not literally obviously, but metaphorically. And I found that, you know, that the skins on the hands and the neck, and it's quite gross, to be honest. I'm not sure if that's something that they dealt with quite often. It was normal in those days, but I know for me that's pretty disturbing, I suppose, because we're not used to it. And it's quite a big deal. It's quite a way to go to win Isaac over for this blessing. And I guess, you know, the correlation, the parallel I'm trying to draw here is with the world is the length that people are willing to go in these sort of advertisements. If I can use my example of this Coles opening down the road from us, the length that people are willing to go to actually draw people in. You know, those bananas, they were $1 a kilo for about, I don't know, it might have been less than a week. And then they went back up to no, they didn't even go back to the normal price. We were teased into, not teased, I should say. We were, I guess, the landing was soft. They went up to about $2.50. I was like, sweet, that's where they're going to stay. Still cheap. Buy more. Then they went up, back up to $4. You know, they sort of made it a soft landing for us so we didn't get a huge shock, I guess. And this is an example of the way that the world can really pitch us these things. I'm obviously talking about a whole variety of things here. I guess it's what you're interested in. For me, alcohol has never been something that I'm interested in at all. Given, you know, I'm guessing by the testimony that I've heard, which by the way have been both amazing testimonies, Chris and Nikki, and different in a way as well. You know, they perhaps were more tempted in their whole life by alcohol and drugs, from what they were saying. It's got to do with what you are. I guess sport is something that I can be drawn in by. It's something that I'm particularly interested in. And there's whatever it is, there is a way that you can definitely be be won over if you're not careful. And the question I have for you is, I guess, a rhetorical question, of course, is, are we like Isaac at any stage of our life? And if we are we actually able to recognize it, unlike Isaac in this particular case, in this story? All right, last little story, I guess, before I just move on. Genesis 2. This is probably the more well-known story across the world. Genesis 2. I'll try and be quick. Said that before. Excuse me. All right. Verse 15, just a couple of verses. This is Adam and Eve, except this is just Adam for the moment when he was told about the tree eating the bad fruit. So I'll read it anyway. Then the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to tend and keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day you eat of it, you shall surely die. Pretty simple instructions there. Pardon me. All right, I'm not going to read on for time again, but if we just skip over to chapter 3, verse 1. Now the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field, which the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, in this little passage that I haven't read here, God's created Eve out of the rib of Adam, as we know. And he said to the woman, has God indeed said, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, we may eat the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat it, nor you shall touch it, lest you die. Then the serpent said to the woman, you will not surely die, for God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. She also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked, but they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves coverings. How far am I going? Yep, I think that's about how far I'm going now. First of all, this highlights more than anything that what was happening down the shopping centre. This has been going on since the second chapter of Genesis. This is not a new thing at all. People in the Old Testament and the New Testament were both having trouble with this kind of a thing, because the serpent, the devil, is trying to sell it here. He's not only just trying to sell it, he's trying to convince Eve that what you think is wrong is not wrong. And yeah, this is a big lesson for us to maybe not necessarily learn, but I'll assume that everyone knows it already, but to be reminded of, I guess. What was particularly appealing about that tree that she had to change her mind just after she told the serpent what God had said. She relayed the instructions, and then all of a sudden, it says in verse 6 that she found that the tree was good for food. It was pleasant to the eyes. So, yeah, it looks good, and a tree desirable to make one wise, whatever that means. She took of its fruit and ate. That was all it took, and that was it. That was it for Eve, and obviously we know that God was pretty angry at this. And I guess the question, again, not that I'm asking you specifically, but from a Christian point of view, is how do we get sucked into these things, or why do we get sucked into these things that we just know that are wrong? We've all been there, It's quite often just so easy to do. These days, of course, it's not eating the fruit. That is very symbolic in some ways, literal in other ways of these days. Gambling, drinking, we know that kind of stuff. I'm not going to necessarily feed that to you like you haven't heard of it before, but that's the nature of it. Tara was telling me a few stories of just the nature of Vegas that she'd just been. There's a reason why it's called Sin City. And unfortunately, people get sucked into this kind of thing by big fountains and big lights and that kind of thing. Okay, moving on. For time, I'm going to, actually, I did write it down. In Proverbs, don't turn there, it says, there is a way which seems right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. Even in laughter, the heart is sorrowful, and the end of that mirth is heaviness. The simple man, simple being aware and being assertive, believes every word, but the prudent man looks well to his going. This lays out exactly what problem that we have. And it explains exactly what can happen and will happen. Excuse me. Pardon me. Philippians 4, if you will. New Testament. Oh, wow. We'll be forced to end this soon. That's such a bad thing. Philippians 4:8. This is, again, something that we've probably read many a time. Verse 8, finally, brethren, whatever things are true, this is Paul talking to the church here, of course, Spirit-filled Christians, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, pure, lovely, whatever things are a good report, if there is any virtue, and if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate or think on these things. The things which you learned and received and heard and saw in me, these do, and the God of peace will be with you. The question I asked before was why do we get sucked into these things? And part B to that question is, how can we then help ourselves? I guess this is a bit of a checklist. This is one of those verses which is quite often rattled off, and not rattled off in a negative sense, but rattled off like it rolls off the tongue. It's, you probably hear it in a few verses, but how much do we actually pay attention to these kind of things? Hopefully lots. I'll assume that, but it is a bit of a checklist. And I guess in terms of the theme of my talk, sometimes these things that appear to be pure, lovely, good report, etc., we can sometimes let things slip into our lives that may appear to be that way, but actually aren't. And we can find ourselves justifying it a little bit, I suppose. We can, if we wrote a checklist down, we could quite easily say it. Well, I reckon that's not too bad, I suppose. Things get a little bit subjective and a little bit grey. But verse 9 clarifies that and says, things which you have learned and received and heard and saw in me, this is Paul talking, these do, and the God of peace will be with you. Me again. He says, look to what I guess I've taught you, Paul, here as a leader. Jesus' teaching, God's teachings. All right. No. Let's go to, I'm going to skip that one. Acts chapter 2. Apologies for my voice. Acts 2. Once again, it's probably the crux of our doctrine, I guess, where it all started. Verse 1, when the day of Pentecost had fully come, they were all with one accord and in one place. And suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled the whole house where they were sitting. Then there appeared to them divided tongues as of fire, and one sat upon each of them, and they were all filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak with other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. For time, I'm going to try and just wrap this up. This is, I guess, the point I had here, little subheading was, what is God selling us? Okay, we know what the world sells us. What is God selling us? And the categorical difference. I love Chris's testimony. He was talking about how, he thought that they were going to take him into the woods and that was it. And I guess even to the point where he was praying and hearing this stuff, he didn't even know. And then this moment happened where he saw Nikki receive the Spirit. That was it. And it just goes to show that, you know, we can have all sorts of qualms and people that are unsaved and people that are saved. They've all got the story, you know, people that are unsaved that can come to the Lord. They've all got the story, seem to have the story of where they were ready to just walk out that door, or they, you know, they said, all right, I'm going to go to one meeting. I'm going to, you know, I'll try this out. If it's wrong, see you later. And 20, 30, 40, 50 years later, they're still here. This undeniable proof, that's what it is. It doesn't have to have bells and whistles and, you know, things attached to it that, well, apart from miracles, of course, but I mean, you know, the glitz and the glamour. It can be as simple as reading words on a screen or in the Bible, wherever, that you can be reminded of this. This is the proof of what happened and what's happened to us. And this is all that we need, I suppose. Mate. You know, and I just love hearing testimonies like that, though, of Chris and Nikki. It just reminds me of what we really have. And I guess it puts us in the right frame of mind again sometimes. Obviously, later on in this chapter, it talks about how to get it. Don't turn there, but in Revelation 21, it's one of my favorite little passages. Just to finish on here, it says, he will wipe every tear from their eyes. This is what God is telling us, I suppose, when he comes back. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. He who was seated on the throne said, I'm making everything new. And he said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. There's no catches here. There's no fine print. There's no, the price is going to go up, you know, but we're not going to tell you. They're not trying to draw us into anything that is a false sense of security. This is, I guess, the difference between heaven and earth. Yeah, all right. Isn't she a good wife? Thank you. Yeah, and finally, I just wanted to share just a quick story on the death or mourning or crying or pain related to my earlier story about going down to the supermarket. With this McDonald's that was built there, we managed to get a couple of free meals. I can't remember how. Oh, no, I do. A couple of friends and I, we had a bit of time, so we went to the official first opening of the McDonald's there. 6 a.m. Can't remember when it was. 6 a.m. on a weekday. We were the first customers to walk in that door. What an achievement, eh? I'm a sarcastic person if you haven't figured that out. And yeah, we had a meal, and then we asked them afterwards, you know, seeing how we were the first ones in the door, you reckon we could get a bit of a free meal or something? Yeah, no worries. Wrote our numbers down, and long story short, we got a free meal, and Tara and I had that free meal. And a short time later, thought we'd have a nice chicken dinner. And we've never eaten chicken at McDonald's ever again. I think Tara would even go as far as saying most other fast food chains, because, you know, a few hours later, it was Christmas Eve, that's right. We got food poisoning from it. And it was, next to tonsillitis, the worst thing that's ever happened in my life, I'm telling you. It was just, called an ambulance even, you know, we were so sick and then Christmas Day, you know, that was pretty difficult, but we were fine afterwards, don't worry. But just really brought to my attention, you know, there is really no such thing as a free lunch in this world, even when it is free, or free dinner. It was free. It was sold to us, you know, here you go, here's a free meal, and now you're going to be sick and have to pay all that money for an ambulance and stuff. It was just amazing. Anyway. But the good thing is that this, no strings attached to, as I said, and I'll leave it there. Thanks very much. I guess we'll have a time of prayer. How's that right, Steve? So Steve will be out here if anyone would like to come and have some prayer. Otherwise, a bit of prayer in the spirit as well. Thanks for